Hello everyone and welcome to Soul GPS. In this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit more about borderline personality disorder, especially as it compares with narcissistic personality disorder. I've been getting quite a few messages from my viewers about the difference and also quite a bit of commentary on my last video. So I want to make some additional commentary about that, addressing some of your concerns, but also I want to really put the two against each other because there's a lot of overlap and a lot of confusion. So in my research, what I did is I compiled 6 main differences between BBT and NPD. And before I jump in, I just wanted to do a little tiny bit of a preamble. And in it, I want to say that there are certain challenges that come with the territory here that we need to be aware of. Number one, these kinds of descriptions, comparisons, lists are quite subjective. Psychology is not hard science such as math, physics, or so on. It's not based on formulas. It's largely based on an observation. So if you feel, as I go down the list, that the people that you know, the people who have affected you and hurt you, somehow, somewhat fit into this category, that really, it doesn't matter too much. What matters is that you've been hurt, you have been manipulated, you have been abused, and there's no excuse for abuse. And you need to remember that if someone is being abusive towards us and we're in a situation that is dangerous, we need to take the proactive steps to excise ourselves from those situations. And also in our process of healing, really ask the question, what made me put up with this abuse? Was it a childhood training? Was it something else? So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, jumping into the topic real quick, people who have BPD, pretty much based on research, pretty much always have also elements of NPD, which is something that I alluded to and explored a little bit deeper in my previous video that I will link down below to this one if you'd like to go deeper into the subject. Whereas people with NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder, don't always have elements of borderline personality disorder. Just wanted to put it out there. So the lines, however, still will blur here. And so again, just a warning, let's not get too caught up on labels. And remember, if it feels bad, it's because it is bad. Another little blurry area here is between people who have borderline personality disorder and people who suffer from CPTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And in this case, one way you can kind of gauge which side of the equation are you on is that most people with BPD have almost like too much ego. This is really simplistic, but that's kind of the way I like to gauge it, is too much ego versus not enough ego. So people who do suffer from CPTSD, who have been victims of abuse from their childhood, from relationships and so on, they struggle to get back their identity. Their life is dysregulated. They're responding really strangely to things that they used to respond normally to. And they do experience the emotional dysregulation that people with BPD experience as well. You know, they seem to be going through a lot of struggle. They tend to withdraw, wanting to run away, wanting to self-isolate. But it's like they don't have enough of a healthy ego. They don't know who they are. They're kind of spinning in circles, you know, constantly berating themselves and beating themselves up and trying to look for a way to regain their sanity. People with BPD may show similar symptoms, but it's still mostly about them, and they're blaming the world for what had happened to them. And remember, victims of narcissistic or borderline abuse tend to take too much responsibility versus people who do have or do suffer from BPD or have NPD tend to put their blame onto other people and use a variety of manipulative tactics to offload their responsibility onto the other people. So there's a little bit of a distinction. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, so the difference number one between BPD and NPD is people with BPD tend to have self-harming tendencies. So especially on the milder side of the spectrum, where they don't lash out so much on the outside, meaning they don't have the need so much to control and have power over other people, they will show and project a lot of self-harming behaviors. And it could range from like burning, headbanging, cutting, and so on. Again, it's due to that really negative internal voice that they have within themselves. People with NPD, it wouldn't even come, it wouldn't dawn on them, the idea that they should self-harm. They feel like they're so important, they're God's heaven sent, really important to be on the planet, super entitled, and harm themselves never, unless, of course, doing so would manipulate their partner or whoever else that they're trying to manipulate to doing something that they want. So they may say, I'm going to kill myself if you don't do this or that. And of course, they would never really consider doing that, but they have no problem saying what they don't mean. You know, narcissists are really known for that. Number two, people with BPD have very intense emotions, whereas people with NPD have shallow affect. Their emoting is much more primal. They lack subtle emotions. So people with BPD are overwhelmed with an avalanche of emotions. It's very difficult for them to deal with it. So they will project that inner chaotic landscape outwards towards their partners, towards their family members, and so on, feeling like the whole world is kind of against them, like they are suffering because of everyone else, and it's like it's all about them, me. So again, this is where they do have that element of narcissism in their personality. Whereas people with NPD, they're great actors. Actually, both can be really good actors, but especially people with NPD, because they have very shallow way of expressing themselves, because they don't really feel subtlety like beauty, compassion, awe. They don't feel that. What they mostly feel is lust, fear, greed, anger. I think these are their primary emotions. So again, too much emotions, not enough emotions. Number three, people with BPD usually have childhood trauma at the core of their dysfunction, whereas people with NPD not always. Meaning that people with NPD can be children of families who have quote-unquote spoiled them. Not so much that they have shamed them, but that they have spoiled them. So they have learned somehow early on in their childhood to make their aggressive behavior that drives them, get them what they want. And they just haven't been sort of put in place, or they have shown a way. I'm so familiar with this because I've seen this in my family. They have figured out a way to almost make the parents be afraid of them. So the parent wouldn't really dare to, raise their voice and put the kid in place where they should be and give them enough discipline. They would just kind of let them do their thing, which allowed them to kind of get away with it years after years after years, with time honing their skills, getting better at it, better at hiding it, and really getting their way. By using other people for the purposes. And actually both do that. Both sides, BPD and NPD, will use other people to do their bidding. That's kind of like at the core of these personality dysfunctions, is that they tend to use people for their purposes. Okay. People with BPD, number four, people with BPD are motivated mostly by fear of abandonment, which, as I had alluded to it in my previous video, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because their behavior drives people away, even though they're afraid. It's the I hate you, don't leave me. They're afraid of being abandoned, but yet their rages, their uncontrollable things that they say and hurl at other people will make the other eventually say, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. Right? And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. NPDs are motivated by power and control over other people. In some cases, sadistic desire to inflict pain on others. Again, there can be some overlap here, depending on how the BPD will express in a person that is suffering from borderline personality disorder. Number five, people with BPD, the way they mirror others and hook others is the love bombing stage is mostly through empathy. whereas people with NPD lack empathy, so they will do it mostly through cognitive mirroring. Now, what does that mean? So again, I've alluded to that in my previous video, but what this means is that people who suffer from BPT have an ability to really kind of feel into the other person, because again, they're really connected to their emotions, so they can kind of tell how another one is feeling. But again, they're going to have a tendency to use it against them. So like, for instance, you can walk into to a room not feeling too well, and they're going to say, well, what have I done again to you? You know, why are you acting this way? Like, what have I done? And the rage can start, the argument can begin to build. But they were accurate in their discernment that the other person wasn't feeling well. Right? So it's kind of like almost scary, like, wow, they can like read my mind. Again, I've been in those situations where the abuser was like really in my head and reading my mind, and it was really, really creepy. And it took me years to finally realize that this was, that had power over it, this had control. I was able to put the boundary and not play into that hallucination, which is partly hallucination and partly it's accurate, because again, they're able to be in tune. People with NPD tend to be really smart, because they are cut off from their emotions. So they study their targets really well, and they're able to act out the person that their partner really yearns them to be. So, for example, now looking back at what had happened to me in my last relationship, which was a hurricane of a whirlwind of a tragic story. It was really painful, but what he did is like, it was so blatantly obvious how he was asking me all these questions about all the things I liked, and like the music that I liked, he liked it too. And which was actually really revealing was one time we were driving in a car, and I put on the band that I loved that supposedly he did too, and he hated it. He wanted to turn it off, and I'm like, I thought you liked it too. Well, it turned out he didn't, but he would tell me that he did, just so that we felt more like we were on the same page. But of course, it's really difficult to sometimes for us to see the obviousness of the game, because we are so lured into the trap by wanting so badly for the person to be who they proclaim themselves to be, to form that partnership that we've been yearning for all our lives. At least that was my downfall, and thankfully I'm free of that now. But my goodness, you know, you can really see how they can get under the radar. So again, BPT are more empathic mirroring. So there is they're almost better at it, I would say, that than an NPD. Whereas an NPD, they just need to. It's all in the words. It's all, and the words are spells. Words are spells. Like what people tell us, some of us will take really, really, really seriously. So we have to be careful. What kind of information we expose ourselves to, and what do we agree with, and what do we let in. Number 5, people with BPD. I just said that one. Number 6, and we're at the last one. People with BPD can feel remorse and guilt, whereas people with NPD cannot. So, for instance, the way it also becomes, in a way, a downfall for a person with a BPD, and makes it, kind of creates a downward spiral effect, is that they're going to, after one of their rages, their accusations, big argument, big fight, they're then going to have a moment of reflection and think about, wow, what have I done? You know, I just hurt my partner. I need this person. Again, fear of abandonment. So they're going to start to feel guilty, and they're going to feel worse and worse about themselves, which is going to make their self-esteem plunge even more. And then the cycle will repeat itself, right? Because now they're not feeling as well about themselves, so they can't stand being alone. So they're going to continue drawing in the person to be within their space, to save them from themselves. And then sooner or later, you know, all they need is a tiny little bit of a reason to suspect that that person isn't there for them, to then again start another cycle. People with NPD, they don't do that. They don't really self-reflect. Instead, what they do is, it's really fascinating. This is such an example of gaslighting and really crazy making. So after a big fight, they're going to just basically, like, it's like they brushed it off and they act as if everything was okay. You know, and you might be still reeling in pain, feeling like, oh my God, what just happened? This is horrible. You know, I've been accused of this and that, and you feel horrible, and you know your heart is still pumping and your body is shaking, and they're like, oh, let's go out to lunch, and you're like, what? What? So they're able to like really move on, and then even they can deny that anything happened. Like, no, we didn't have an argument. Are you kidding me? I remember having that happen to me many times, both with family and with my partners. You know, after very intense exchange of words, you know, and me wanting to kind of cool off and then come back and like try to resolve the issue. They're like, no, what are you talking about? Everything is fine. Everything's great. Like, wow. And I felt like I was the one who was crazy. Okay, so this kind of sums up the differences between BPDs and NPDs. I hope this helped. And I wanted to also mention a couple of things, because I've had people make comments, people who suffer from borderline personality disorder, and I'm really, really, really sorry, you know, that that you have this disorder. I'm sure it's not that you asked for it, so my heart goes out to you in that way. But I just want to say, if you have it, be gentle with yourself. But also remember, don't abuse other people. You know, it's not okay to project your inner pain onto other people. And many people with BPD have this attitude of like, I suffer, the whole world is guilty, so to speak. You know, the whole world should help me. But the fact of the matter is, we're all suffering, all of us. Like, let's look around. Like, we're on the brink of something, I feel, in our world. And I don't want to get off on a tangent talking about that right now, but I think many of us can sense it, that it's like there's so much tension, both on the personal level, on an international level, and we need to learn to be more empathic and compassionate towards one another, learn to hold each other, and say absolutely no to abuse. Absolutely no to abuse, and learn to take responsibility for our emotions, for our journeys, for our paths in life, so that we don't keep on projecting our own bullshit onto other people. And if you do need help, seek help. You know, learn maybe nonviolent communication. Again, I'm not a therapist. I don't know much about, you know, how to help yourself out of this. I wish there was a magic word I could say and make all the pain go away, but unfortunately I can't. I remember when I was a teen, and I was suffering from a lot of emptiness, from a lot of confusion. I think I had my existential crisis already at the age of 14, but it was a horrible feeling. And I remember oftentimes interpreting things that people would say as it was against me. And it was really dramatic time. And I remember one thing that I recently came across when I was studying borderline personality disorder was that no teenagers should be diagnosed with BPD, because they're all very dramatic, and many outgrow this way of being this stage. So, you know, if you're young and if you worry that you might have this, maybe you don't. Maybe you're just going through growing pains. But again, let's bring it back to the bottom line, and that is, there's no excuse for abuse. So if you feel like you're hurting, learn to communicate in a way so that you don't accuse another person of hurting you. And if you do feel like you have been genuinely hurt by someone and abused, then you need to take proactive steps to protect yourself and remove yourself from the situation. And here I'm talking mostly to, you know, the people who have been through narcissistic abuse, borderline abuse, you know, who have really strong empathic abilities. And these are the people who want to help others. And we often fall into the trap of wanting to save the other person, only to see that person really not wanting the help and slide right back into the disorder and continue to accuse us of being horrible to them. So just keep that in mind. Take good care of yourself, and no matter where you are on the spectrum, take good care of yourself. That's essential. If you haven't had the childhood that most of us should have had, you know, most of us didn't have it, unfortunately. We need to learn to self-parent. We need to learn to protect ourselves. We need to learn to be more self-compassionate. And if you have that dialogue, that really, really negative dialogue that tells you, you know, you're a piece of shit, you're an idiot, you don't deserve love and this and that, catch that and question it. Who's talking? You know, oftentimes we internalize abuse based on things that people have told us. That is not true. None of that is true. What is true is that we are all beings of light. We all have come to this world with a pure soul. And if we want to retrieve that and get that back, then we need to really work on ourselves by getting rid of all the negativity that we have picked up and really nurturing our soul and putting our new conviction into action and acting in a way that is according to, that reflects how we want to think about ourselves and is much more in line with the people that we really want to be. So it's a journey. It's an amazing journey. And as I have said many times in my other videos, I feel like having been through this abuse, having been through this nightmare, really woke me up to so much in life. And it's been really a blessing in disguise. You know, a year ago, I was in so much pain. I was suffering. I wanted to end my life. And I'm so glad I didn't, because this journey has made me learn intricacies of my psyche, which then made me even more empathic, not just towards myself and compassionate towards myself, but also towards other people, to realize how much we're all struggling, how much pain, how much unnecessary pain there is in the world, you know, and maybe together, step by step, as we learn to take good care of ourselves, we can also make the world a better place. Thank you so much. I hope this video helped you. I'm sending you lots of love, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.